A quirk about language models is that they can generate text that is grammatically correct, but semantically nonsensical. And the reason for that is that grammatical correctness is a property that is quite easy to learn, while semantic correctness is much harder. Now, I say grammatical correctness is easy to learn, and that it kind of mirrors how humans actually learn grammar. We learn by observing over and over again that whenever we're referring to something in the past, we use the past tense. We learn that in gendered languages like French or German, we need to use the correct gendered pronouns. So the word Tisch, for example, that's table, is masculine in German. So we say der Tisch, the table, and not die Tisch or das Tisch, which is either feminine or neutral. And the word Stadt, that's city in German, we would say die Stadt, which is the city, and not der Stadt. So it's not the masculine, it's not the neutral, it's the feminine. And LLM models learn these patterns by observing that 100 out of 100 times when the word Tisch is used as table, it's preceded by the word der, and not die and not das. And 100 out of 100 times when the word Stadt is used, that's city, it is preceded by the word die. So this makes LLM a very powerful tool for generating text. It uses the pattern it has observed to calculate the probability of the next word in a sentence, and then it generates the word with the highest probability or likelihood, and it does this over and over again until it has formed a whole sentence. And once you have a sentence, it repeats that, now you have a paragraph, and it repeats that, you have a whole body of text. Now the intriguing part of LLM is that this probability model is not limited to just words. It can be used to generate any sequence of tokens, including images, videos, audios, and even code. And since it works in a probabilistic way, it needs to be trained on vectors, which is numerical representations of the data. Now I have a full video that goes into this, focusing on sentence embeddings and how they use to train LLMs, and you can check out that video if you want to learn more about that. Now to make things fun and real, today's video is about doing some world building for a video game that we'll create. Now I've spent about 7 to 8 years in the game industry, which brought me to the US, to Japan, Philippines, stayed a year in China, and then I go back to Singapore. And I love playing space, civilization, and simulation games during my downtime. So that's what we'll be modeling our game after. We're going to need to generate some in-game characters for our video games. We need a title, we need some civilization, some fictional heroes, leaders, and some in-game dialogues for the cutscenes. We're going to do all of that with the Cohere API, and just to make things more fun, we're also going to generate some cutscene images, some backgrounds, character portraits, and other game assets using Stability AI's Dream Studio. If you ever heard of Stable Diffusion, Stability AI is the makers of that. So if you want to build your own civilization-inspired game and you need help writing some creative dialogues, this video is a great introduction to using generative AI for that. Otherwise, if you're here to just learn about LLMs and get a different perspective on how LLM generates text using this probabilistic approach, then you'll learn a lot of that as well. So let's dive in and start building up our video game world. You can create a file right in your project folder or on your desktop, wherever you please. I'm using the project folder as the one in my Learn LLM playlist, in which I covered a bunch of LLM key concepts and built a bunch of mini projects. There are 9 to 10 videos in that series already, so if you want to have the same directory, you can check out the playlist or just clone it from my GitHub repo and just follow along. Now I will name the file 11 worldbuilding.py. And now we can start by importing the libraries that we'll need. Now I want to introduce you to Cohere, and let's talk about the simplest usage pattern and start from there. So let's import Cohere. You can initialize the client by saying co cohere.client. You can name it anything you want, but I think as a convention we just name it co cohere, and then you pass in your API key. And once you've done that, step 3 is really simple, just co.generate. And this is when you write your prompt. So you could say something like, civilization is a video game, and it would try to complete that for you. Now, of course, if you've been following this series, you know that I'm an advocate for not trying to put your keys into your code, try to isolate that, put that into a separate file, just for security. Best practice is good code hygiene. So what we do is we'll bring in those things as well. So I'm going to say import OS, then I want to have my from.env import load.env. Quickly go ahead and just load in the environments. So what this is going to do is going to look for a file called .env, that's the file, and then from that env file, it's going to try and load everything in when you call load.env. So all of your variable keys, your secret keys, your tokens, all of that stuff, right? You don't want to put them in a code because you may accidentally commit them on GitHub, or you may share that, or whatever reasons. You don't want to have that in your code. It's just not good practice. So put them into an env file and load.env to bring them in. And now you could substitute your API key with the os.getEnv Cohere API key. And this is going to look for your env file and go and find this key. So your env file may have something like Cohere API key, and then you have a secret key, yada yada yada. So that is going to be loaded in here. So if you name it Cohere API key, you want to put this in and make sure you tailor that accordingly. Alright, so I'm going to delete this, and let's go ahead and just try to run this 11 worldbuilding.py. So I'm going to run that file, and it definitely did show something based on the history of human civilization. So we need to print that out. It's because it predicted, and then you could just print predicted, right? So the simplest usage pattern, if you want to hard code it into your files, I don't know why you want to do that, but if you want to do that, then it's just 3 lines of code: import Cohere, and then Cohere.client, and then code.generate, and that's it. So what do I have now? I have the text here. Civilization is a video game, and this is what Cohere is doing for me. Based on the history of human civilization, the game is played by building an empire, raising whatever, right? And it's not continuing that because I did not give it a max generation. So the default, I think, is 50 characters, and here it's already 50 characters, so it stops there. So if you want to, you could go ahead and say max tokens, maybe make it a little bit longer, 80, run it again, and now it's longer. So Civilization is a video game series and board game created by the American game designer Will Wright based on his vision of a just right game that will combine the best elements of his favorite games: the turn-based strategy scope of PBS, Antiques Roadshow, and the simple elegance of Pong. And the game was first released in 1991. Now, I don't know, I didn't really go and fact check all of this stuff, but this is what it generates to try and complete this sentence for me. So you give it a prompt, and I said now give it a max tokens of 80, and so it's willing to go a little bit more than the first time. Now remember about the probabilistic model that we spoke about, right? We talked about the probabilistic model, looking at likelihoods. So how do we reason about that from here? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna actually add a few more parameters. So I'm gonna bring this down, and here I'm gonna say prompt, use the name keywords. I will also change the number of generations. I will change that to 3. I want to have 3 generations. Maybe, in fact, let's do 5 generations. Now, just like using OpenAI, GPT-3 model, GPT-4 model, there's this temperature, right? The higher the temperature is, it makes the things more wild. It makes your LLM more wild, more adventurous, more random. The output may be more random, it may be more bold, right? But if you set the temperature to be lower, it's gonna do something more predictable, more deterministic in a way, right? So in this case here, I wanted to try something else. I'm gonna say something like 0.8, make it a little bit higher. I think the default is 0.7, same as OpenAI GPT model. So I have the prompt, number of generations, temperature, max tokens. Now you know what else I want to return? I want to return the likelihood. So I want to say return likelihoods, and here I want to return the generations. So the generation basically means that when it generates the response for you, that's the generation. I want to say what is the likelihood that this is the right one. So you either say generation or all or none. Alright, so this could be generation, this could be capital or none. So it's not 0, it's none, right? This one as well, it gave you a none here, but now I'm going to say return likelihood. Show me the likelihood of the sentences that you generate after this. So I'm saying here that Civilization is a video game based on the history of human civilization. What is the likelihood of this being the text given this prompt? Alright, so I'm going to ask it for that figure as well. Let's go back here, let's quit that out, let's run it. And now this is more interesting. So let me pull this up, show you more. I wanted 5 generations, so it's generating 5 of them. That's quite a lot of them. So the first one, Civilization is a video game based on history, and it allows the player to found and expand their own civilization. And here it gives you a likelihood of negative 0.872557. Now typically speaking, all the likelihood is going to be negative because of the log, and because it's very, very unlikely. You have to write something so obvious that the likelihood is close to a positive number. But generally speaking, it's any of these sentences is very unlikely, right? It's probabilistically unlikely. If somebody is writing Civilization is a video game, what is the chance that they are going to complete the probability? What's the probability of them actually writing the rest of this text and it's exactly the same sentence? It's very, very unlikely. So that's the likelihood of that. And you will see the token likelihood. So it says that if I use the word civilization, what is the probability of the word next? If I use the word is, what is the probability of the word and video and game? And so here's the same thing. It says base and then on history. So each one of them has a likelihood. The higher it is, then the more likely or the more confident that the model thinks that word should follow. And the lower it is, then the more unlikely that word should appear. And then it picks the word that has the most likelihood. So the first one here, it ranks this by negative 0.87, and it says Civilization is a video game based on history, allows the player to found and expand their own civilization. What about the next one? Because I asked for 5 generations. So the next one, Civilization is a video game, and it says Civilization is a turn-based strategy video game. Likelihood negative 0.44. This one, Civilization is a video game series developed by Firaxis Game and designed by Sid Meier. I think this is the correct one. It's actually designed by Sid Meier. It's not the other guy there. Now, the first game in the series was Sid Meier's Civilization, originally developed and published by Microprose in 1991. This I do not know. You have to Wikipedia that out. Negative 0.4. So this is quite high, right? The game's premise is to build an empire and become the most powerful civilization in the world. And then the last one, 0.5. This is more unlikely, but it's still there. But if you're thinking about this, you may think, okay, I don't want it to just complete my sentences. What if I want to ask a question? What if I have a question, I want to do some Q&A? Well, how would I change its behavior? Because there's only the prompt. Can I change the behavior somewhat such that I could form a question, and instead of trying to complete my question, it tries to answer the question? So let's try and have this as a question, and I will try to say something like code.generate. Like, how do we know that the Earth is round? Just like above, I want it to have a few number of generations. So I'm going to say number of generations, and I want to have it as 5. So I'm asking a question. If you're doing this with a Q&A model, so like let's say GPT-3, GPT-4, you will know that this is a question, and you will try to form an answer. So let's take a look. We know that the Earth is round because of the evidence provided by science. The evidence includes the yada yada, but because we didn't set the max token, it's cut off here. That's okay. And you see the rest are different variations of that. So this points to the probabilistic model of like trying to generate believable completions based on your prompt. Instead of directly answering the question the way you would expect, like GPT-3 or GPT-4, what it doesn't actually do that. What it does is that it tries to generate a sentence based on what you gave it in the prompt and try to make a highly probabilistic, or what is highly likely, right, to be the word following another, and that is what it's doing. Now, I say that I want to be using this to generate my word building, to create my word building, so I need to take this into account later when I write my prompt. I need to be quite specific. I'm going to give you a few tips here to sort of engineer your prompt a little bit better so that you get much more meaningful results. This is not good enough for us. If our game has crappy sentences like that, it's not good enough. So we need to engineer the prompt, and that's what we're going to be doing. Alright, so for now, I'm going to remove this tool. You can keep it there. You can just comment them out. Now, what we'll do is we'll try and turn this generate into its own function, so that we don't have to retype all of this stuff. So ideally, I just want to say generate, and it should fill up all of this things for me, right? So let's go ahead and create that function. So define, and just call it generate, and then we're going to say predictions. This is basically the same as what we were doing up here. So we have the predicted equals the code to generate, right? So this is what we're going to be doing. And then we have the prompt, number of generations, temperature, return likelihoods. I've explained all of them. So we just go and fit all of this in there. So we have prompt. Now prompt is just going to be prompt. And where is prompt going to come from? It's going to be from here. Right, so it's going to be in the signature. We can also optionally pass in a model. So we can say the default is to use the base model. The base model is one of the oldest model. There are actually more recent models. I'm not going to use that first. I'm going to use that later on. But right now, let's just stick with the default. You can pass in a value to override that, but that's the default value. Then we're going to have some default as well, the number of generations. So above we use 5. In here we use 5. So let's also use 5 in here, right? So let's say 5. Guess we can also have the temperature. I want the temperature to default to 0.7. I think that's usually very sensible. Then we set maximum tokens of 64. Once that's done, let's just go in there and populate the rest. So model equals to model. Num of generations is the same. Num of generations, temperature, temperature. So we have num generations, temperature. We haven't used max tokens. Let's use that. Right up here, we have the return likelihoods equals to generation. I said you can use generation or all or none. Well, I like to use generations just so I can explain the concept while we're seeing this. If you're coding this on your own for your own project, you don't have to turn it on. But I like to turn it on just to be able to see that and then explain that to you. So when I have my return likelihood, and I will have my generation. All is going to give you the likelihood of not just the generated, but also the prompt. And I don't need that, right? Really, we just care about the generated text by our LLM. So let's just keep the generation right now. I will want it to turn this into a dictionary, and then I'll print it into a data frame so that I can see the data frame and take a look at all the suggested generation and the probability. So I'm going to use pandas for that. I'm going to also go and bring that in. So go all the way to the top, say import pandas as PD. So it's going to bring pandas in. So the plan is to first create a dictionary and put all of the generated text as a key, and the value would be the probabilities, right, or the likelihood in this case. So I'm going to say generations, and I will want to just initialize that into an empty dictionary. And then I'll go through a for loop. I'll say that go through each one of the predictions in here for prediction in predictions, or go through each one of the generated, take that and then start to populate this dictionary. Okay, so for generation in predictions dot generations, that's where it stores all of the generated text. Let's say generations, initialize that to 0. Let me explain what I'm doing here. You see all of the token likelihood here. It says that there is the word strategy in players. So all of them, this is the token likelihood, right? So the token likelihood, we want to sum all of them to see what is the total. So I would want to iterate through all of this token likelihood, and that's how I do it. So I'm going to go in with another for loop again. So say for token likelihood in generation, the token likelihoods, generation text, we just add that. So this is going to take the likelihood of each one of this token and just sum them up and put them into a dictionary. Let's call generate somewhere before we run this. Let's just say generate, and let's give it a prompt. So again, Civilization 6, the latest addition. So Civilization 6 is a video game, and let's just try to complete the rest. Run this. Okay, we forgot to print that out, so we should have said like result or something and then print the result. But since we forgot to do it, let's just run it manually in the prompt. So now we have this dictionary, and each of the key would be the predicted text. So we want 5 versions of that. We said the number of generations is 5. So Civilization 6 is a video game developed by Firaxis Game, and so this is wrong. It's not Firaxis, it's actually Firaxis. And published by 2K, it was released on 21st of October 2016. This is the total likelihood. And then the next one would be developed by Firefly Studios. This is wrong. It's not developed by Firefly Studios unless I'm missing something. And this is the likelihood. And then the last one. So in total, we have 5 versions of generation. Each one of them is accompanied by the generated text and the likelihood. So let's actually print this out into a table so we can see this better. So instead of returning generations, this is what we're going to do instead. We're going to say something like, turn this into a data frame. Right. So we have df pd.dataframe from dict, and from dict basically asks for a dictionary, and it says give me a dictionary, and I'll go from dictionary to a data frame. So I say from dict and generation, then give it a orient it by index, so go by row, and then give it some columns, and the columns in this case is just one column. It's just one column because it's just a dictionary with one key to one value, one key to one value. And so what would the column be? It's called you can call it likelihood, you can call it sum of likelihood, whatever, right? And in this case, sum of likelihood probably makes sense because it's just summing it up from initializing to 0 and then summing it up iteratively. So I'm going to do that. And then I want to sort the data frame so that I want to see the most likely generation, the most likely body of text, and then the next most likely, and then the least likely would be at the bottom. So how do I sort this based on likelihood? That's very easy. So you could either sort it in place, or you could say something like df sort values. Then you sort by what? Sort by likelihood. You could have multiple tiebreaker if you want, but in this case we only have one column anyway, and I want to set ascending equals to false, which means sort by descending order. So the one with the greatest value would be at the top, and the one with the lowest value would be at the bottom. So ascending equals to false, do that, and finally return the df. So this is great. Now let's go ahead and start creating our game. I want to have some sort of game config up here. So this could be a simple dictionary. You could put them in the separate JSON file and then just use import JSON and load them in. But just to keep things simpler, I'm just gonna put everything in here. Later on, if this becomes too large, feel free to isolate them into its own JSON file. So I want to set my story configuration. I want to create my own fictional world, right? My world building. So in my world, I want to have a few, let's first of all, let's start from a title. Every game needs a title. If you don't have a title, what are you selling? So let's start from title. Let's generate some title from here. Let's ask for like 7 versions of title, right? So story configuration, the first thing is the title prompt. So I'm going to say title prompt. You don't have to have it in this way. You can have it your own way. I'm just showing you how I would build things in real. But if you want to have this in the separate, you want to have this, just hard-coded into the text itself, you can do that, absolutely. And let's go and give it a title prompt. When I use triple quotation, I can make this a multi-line string. So here we describe our game a little bit. We tell our Cohere model, we say, hey, this is what my game is about. Can you find some good titles for it, right? So I want to say realistic video game title for a game inspired by Civilization, Starbound. Starbound is another great game. RimWorld. So RimWorld as well, if you haven't heard of that, check it out on Steam. It's a really great game as well. So Civilization, Starbound, and maybe Surviving Mars. I like Greenwood a lot, so you could also add that in, right? I want to say something like turn-based, deep tech trees. So everyone loves deep tech trees. Every boys grow up playing Pokemon and stuff, and you see like it's a very linear fashion. You know, you learn this skill and you learn next at certain level, and that's not fun. Deep tech tree allows you to unlock different branches, and every time you play the game, you get a different branch, and you get to be more strategic with the choices you make, and each choices has more consequences to it, and it's just a much better game design. So deep tech trees, we want that. We also want our game to have multiplayer maybe, and single player mode for some of us who just want to play offline chill after a hard day of work. You don't want to chat with anyone. Available. Okay, and I want to have some sort of card-based mechanics. I don't know why that matters to me, but I always love games with card-based mechanics where there's a little bit of like draw the cards and stuff. So one of the games that I like to play is Star Traders. I don't know if anyone heard of these games. Civilization has a bit of a card-based approach where you pick a card and you put them into your civil. So I'm going to give you some examples for you to prompt. So I would say something like, let's say, colonizing Mars, right? And then I want to give it a few more examples and ask it to prompt more. So I'm going to say, give it a few more examples, and let's say space empires. And then one more title. Just give it some title and then ask it to give you more title, right? So let's say Interstellar, because that's a cool name. Frontiers. One of the first game I worked on, you know, back in 2012, is this game called Brave Frontier. I don't know how many of you heard of this game before. Later on, there is also a game called Brave Exvius, Final Fantasy. So Brave Exvius. So if you play any of this game, studio behind that is Gumi. So I work for Gumi as a head of publishing, and I work on the analytics and stuff like that. If you play Brave Frontier back then and you open up the game and you look at the credits scene, you actually see my name in there. So I used to work on in the mobile game industry. Frontiers is a great name, so let's give it there. And I want to stop it somewhere. So you don't want to just end it like that because you wouldn't know what to do. Because remember how it generates a probabilistic approach? It says it needs to complete the sentence for you. So here you're not asking it to complete anything. It would try to complete that, but let's not leave that to chance. Let's instead, this is what we do. We say title, and then here is where we want it to complete. So I'm gonna cut off this, and I will say, given all of this, try to complete the remaining. Now, because I'm giving it a few examples, I'm giving it colonizing Mars, space empires, and interstellar frontiers. I'm actually gonna separate each one of them with the new line. So I want my prompt to understand that. So I could actually have an extra one here that says something like stop sequences. And I will say every time you see a \n, that's breaking to a new one. So this is one example, one example, one example. So these are stop sequence. And then later on, when it tried to generate something, it would also stop at the /n. Right, so you can do that. You can also pass this into its own parameter and just use this in the function signature and just bring that in. But in this case here, I'm thinking I'm also going to be using the same, so this is good. So I now have a title prompt. Let's go into our file. At the bottom of the file, let's do a if name.main. So if we run this file directly and not import them anywhere, I want to generate some titles, and the titles will be generate. Now this is where my story config is coming into play. This is a story configuration. You can name it anything you want, and then story config, and then the key of title prompt. So let's do that. Story config title prompt. I would want to print some titles to take a look at them. Save it. So you can clear the screen, you quit out your console. Python 11. We're building. Now this is going to kick off the generate, and it's going to use this function. It's going to run the code generate. Then it's going to pass in the title prompt, which is up here. Let's generate some title for our game. What's a game without a title? Let's run it, and there we have it. So we have, it says text contains a trailing white space which has been trimmed to ensure high quality generation. So it's pretty nice. It does a few more work for you. And I love the titles, I have to say. And this is going to be different every single time. So because this is all probabilistic, every time you run it, and also depending on how high you set the temperature to be, you're going to get some pretty raw results. But the first and the second one looks brilliant. Galactic colonies. I give it some examples like colonizing Mars, space empires, interstellar frontiers, and it came up with galactic colonies, galactic civilizations, space MMO, starship drift, recolonization of Mars. Actually, to think about it, I don't really want a multiplayer again because I don't know if it's the age or something. I'm not that kind of player anymore. I don't really enjoy multiplayer games anymore. I love it to be single player, slow, you know. So this is good enough. Single player modes available with card-based mechanics. That's all. I don't want multiplayer anymore. Alright. This is the most likely one based on the likelihood. And how do you get the likelihood again? Then take a look at the code. You basically just look at the token, sum all of them up. So this brings you back to the one up here, right? Token likelihoods. It takes each of the likelihood and it basically do a sum. So I like the first one, I like the second one. Interplanetary is fine, but I also wanted to have like some sort of world building on planets, on new planets. So Starship kind of give off the vibe that it's really just everything is interplanetary, everything is in space, and that's not really what I'm going for. Recolonization of Mars sounds like a pretty okay game, but man, who's gonna buy a game like that? A game like Galactic Colonies, I think it's gonna sell really well. So this is great. Now the next thing I want to do is a game like Civilization would have leaders you can choose, or like heroes, right? When you start a game, you start a new game, you can choose a hero, you can choose a civilization leader, and so you have all the historic leader, right? The Abraham Lincoln, Lee Kuan Yew for Singapore. China, you have something like Qin Shi Huang, who I think built the Great Wall. So you have a few leaders like this. But in our world here, this is all about space, so we don't want those historical figures. I guess you can have one or two of them. But it's up to you, right? So I'm going to have some leaders. I'm going to say generate some fictional leaders for me. So generate, and I want to use the same setup. I want to say put this into the story config. So the idea being, if I put everything in the, I'm going to say save leaders. The idea being, if I put everything into the story config, it's easy for me to control this and set this up as JSON, or I can build it into the web application and generate this whole thing based on input. So you can have a web app, and in the web app, somebody could just fill up some simple title prompt and stuff, and your AI model is going to generate all of that for you. So I want to have everything packaged in a nice thing, in a nice area. And so story config is kind of the container containing all of that configurations. So I call it title prompt up there, so I want to be consistent and call it Civ leaders prompt. Okay, and then you can print the leaders. Now let me save all of this, and now I'm going to add the Civ leaders prompt. So let's not misspell it by copying it there. Put this in. Again, have a multi-line. Now let's give it a Civ leaders prompt and to ask it to generate some fictional characters that we can use in the game, some heroes or some leaders that you can choose. So kind of the same thing up here as realistic video game titles for a game inspired by Civilization. I want to give it a brief explanation of what I'm trying to do, and then give it some examples and ask it to complete that for me. So kind of the same ideas here. So I want to say something like realistic names for leaders of a space theme Civilization video game. Right? You can give it a few leaders. This is really a creative practice. Go ahead and just put in your own names. So let me try and add something like Jeff Bezos. Usually you spell it like B-Z-O-S, but I'm not going to spell it that way. I'm going to spell it Bezos, so that I don't run into legal troubles with Jeff Bezos' team. So I'm going to say Jeff Bezos, fictional person. You know, you can't sue me for anything, just a fictional person. I will say that he rules over the civilization of Amazonia. Okay? That is his civilization. He rules over Amazonia, and his leader description. So I could say something. Jeff Bezos is the leader of the Amazonian civilization. He is a ruthless businessman who will stop at nothing to expand his prosperous space-faring empire. Save that. Have another leader. Again, I don't want to be sued or anything, so I'm not going to use his name. I'm going to say Elon Musk. Actually, Musk. Actually, no, let's do Elon Musk. I don't know, just anything, right? As long as you don't use a real name here so that you don't run into people don't sue you for anything. Civilization. Guy is known for a lot of things. Elon Musk do a lot of things, but one of Elon Musk's biggest achievement is that he also runs, or he inherits a pretty big emerald land, so his name is going to be Emeraldo, right? One of his big achievements. You can have some description for him, just like the same as the above. A billionaire. At one point, he was the world's richest person, right? So, say billionaire and a pioneer, because he is kind of a pioneer in private space travel. So, private pioneer in private space travel. He is the leader of the loyal Emeraldo civilization. Now, there's people in the Emeraldo, they really worship him. It's just a big fan of him. Just have incredibly loyal and fanatic civilization. So if you start with Elon Musk, you get a lot of other perks, but one of it is that your civilization is less likely to want to try to rebel and try to form unions against the government or whatever, right? So Elon Musk is just a very celebrated figure in his civilization Emeraldo. I want to give you the last one, okay? So last one, I'm just going to call it Tony Stark. and civilization. And here you just call it stock assembly. Can't give it a real name because again you don't want Disney or Marvel sending me a letter, so I'm gonna say stock assembly. And then I want to give it a description as well. Follow the template provided. Okay, he is a genius, inventor, and he get all the ladies. So I want to say he's charismatic. If you start as this character, your diplomatic skills is gonna be 10 out of 10. You know, easily make friends, everyone love you, and known for his philanthropic I think efforts. Right, that's it. And because we said we want to end each of the example with an N, with let's do that. So new line, new line, new line. Then just give it, bring this up like this. So now it's gonna try and complete the leader for me. He's gonna generate how many for me? 5 of them, right? It's gonna say number of generations required. So I'm gonna say number of generations, and I want to have you generate 7 for me because I want the game to have a lot of choices, a lot of leaders to pick from. So let's quit this out and clear the screen. Now we say Python world building. Well, it wouldn't let me generate 7. It would say only 1 to 5. Okay, that's cool. Let's do it. Let's copy that. All right, let's print leaders. Okay, so we have Bill Gates, Jack Jambaru, Dr. Rabel, Bob Swall, and Bernie Star. There are some pop references that I'm not getting. Maybe some of these are famous characters that I'm not aware of, except Bill Gates. I understand Bill Gates. But the reason it's trying to generate Bill Gates from me is because it sees that I'm using examples like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Tony Stark. I guess if you don't like that, you don't want to have any kind of names that mirror a real person's name, then you just don't want to give this kind of nonsense names. And anyway, just change it to something else. Instead of Jeff Bezos, give it something else. Give it Adam Smith or whatever. Some other names that that they would use. And so let's take a look at each one of them. So this is a data frame. I want to look at leaders. If I say leaders and take the first one. So the first one is Bill Gates. Civilization is called space. That's a bad civilization name. I don't really like it. But Bill Gates is the leader of the space civilization. He is a visionary who is dedicated to the exploration and advancement of humanity. Okay, at least this part is quite accurate. So Bill Gates is very dedicated to the exploration and advancement of humanity. What about the first one? Jack Jambaru, Outback. This I like better. I like the Outback sort of. I can get where it's going for, right? Jack is the leader of the Outback civilization. He is a fierce warrior and will stop at nothing to defend his civilization. Okay, great. Bernstar Steroid, that's his civilization. Bernstar is the leader of the Steroid civilization. He is a famous entrepreneur who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. A bit repetitive because he uses stop to nothing and here he uses stop nothing. So I want it to have a bit of changes here. So we can also tweak the prompt to make sure it doesn't try to repeat itself. Well, let's continue to look at the rest. Alright, so let's go to number 4. Dr. Robel, The Republic. I like this one. Sounds very very classic in every science fiction. There is always space science fiction. There is always the Republic, and Dr. Robel is a renowned astrophysicist and the leader of the Republic, a utopian society that is filled with scientific wonders. And you also know that they are the fastest to turn rogue. If anything goes wrong, Dr. Rebel and his guys is the fastest to go and nuke the world. And I mean, in this case, it's not just the world; it's just the whole galaxy, right? So Dr. Rebel is the kind of person that you don't want to mess with, and you don't really trust fully, right? You know they're aware, you respect their authority, but you don't really trust. And that's kind of Dr. Rebel's role in here. And let's take a look at the 4th one, Bob Swall. Bob Swall is the leader of Earth. He is a tough, snails, old-fashioned kind of guy who is a bit skeptical of the new space station. I like this character as well. Very typical trope as well. You see this as well in space fiction, science fiction. You always have that guy who is kind of the opposite of Dr. Rebel. Dr. Rebel focus on scientific wonders, trying to do things like cybernetic arms and stuff, trying to move human into the next generation that is more adapted to interstellar nomadic lifestyle. And then the Bob Swall is the opposite of that. So I think this is doing a pretty reasonable job, right? And if you don't like it if you don't want it to have like Bill Gates and stuff, then try not to have Tony Stark or Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Have some other name so that it doesn't try to pick that up. From here, it try to pick up the spirit of what you have here in the examples, and it try to generate Bill Gates. just to point to the fact that this is all LLM, it's all random, it's all probabilistic, it's all random. You see now that well, every time I run this, it's gonna give me 5 different results again. So here, instead of having the earlier results, which I like, now it's gonna have space settlers, colonization, space age, space frontiers, and starfarer. Yeah, so it doesn't always generate the same results, okay? It gives you different results each time you try to run it. So let's clear the screen. Now, one other thing before we go any further even, is that there is all these new lines that you see, the new lines here. Well, we want to remove that. So now we have our title, we also have our leaders, but you know what would be nice is to generate some portraits, some leaders portraits, some cards, some art assets that we could use to put a face behind each of these names. So it would be nice to have an asset behind this Dr. Rubble and Star and Jack Jambaroo. So if you want to follow along this part, you can. And this is where I'm going to use the Stability AI to generate some text to image. Alright, so I'm going to go up into my imports and I'm going to bring in some text to image and generate some nice portraits for us to use in our game. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. So I will need to use the IO in order to use my image reader, my system's image reader. There is also from Peel import image. So Peel, this is Python imaging library, right? These two are what I'm going to use to generate images, to show the images, but the one I'm going to be using to generate image would be from Stability SDK import client. And you need to install all of this. If you haven't, you need to do a pip install, and then say Stability SDK, and then you also need to install Cohere. So I'm sure you've already done that by now. Just quit that out. So let's go ahead and generate some images. And before I was distracted by my dog, who just wandered in, there is the predictions. I just mentioned that there is the new space here, the new line here, there's the \n/n. I want to actually remove that before I actually put them into my dictionary. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to say text equals to generation.text, and we're going to replace what with what? We replace all of the \n with nothing. And then we just have to replace this with text. Alright, so that is going to take care of all the \n. It's going to just replace it with nothing, and that's kind of what I want. Okay, now let's create our other function. So we have one function, which is the generate function. I also want to have a generate image function. So I could use that to generate civilization, big maps, massive game assets, cards, portraits, leaders, all of those things. If I have skills and stuff, I want an image for each of the skills. So like lightning bolt, economic prosper, or whatever, right? Those are skill cards that you can have, and you can use AI to help you with that. So let's go ahead and say generate image, and let's say take a prompt. And what do we do up here? We start with the co.generate. So it needs a co. It needs to basically have a client. So here's the client. Let's go ahead and also create our client here. So let's say stability equals to stability inference. You see what we did up here is we say os.getEnv. This is kind of the same thing. I want to say key equals to os.getEnv. This is the stability API key. So they are the same guys that created Stable Diffusion, an open source image model, and you can use it. And so this is kind of a well-known product here, right? So stability API key, and I want to pass verbose equals to true because it is also going to print out a few information that I can use to explain later on. So I'm going to say verbose equals to true. If you're doing this for your own project, you don't have to print all of this to be. And in my generate image, I'm going to say so this is my generations, stability.generate. And generate what? Generate prompt. That's it. So very similar to what you have. This is called predictions. I could also name it predictions. So if you want to name it predictions, you can also name it predictions. So that is kind of the same here. Predictions equals to quota generate. Predictions equals to stability generate. And that's kind of it. Now, in case there are multiple images, you want to look through them. So have the for image in predictions. Then we want to say for artifact and image dot artifacts. Then we want to say just maybe check that it's in fact an image type. And you check that by saying if artifact type equals to 1 image. Then you want to just open that up. And this open is why I bring in the IO in here, because now these are all just bits and bytes. So you need to use the IO to sort of read them using a bytes IO. So you want to say IO.bytes IO artifact binary. Okay, if you're curious about all of this stuff, I can't really explain all of this to keep the video short and concise, but I do have a few videos about computer vision and about using PLL, using things like Pillow. So if you want to check that out, go and look for those videos on my channel, and they would help you understand more of this. I'm not going to go into too much of the details to keep it relatively fast. Image.show is something I've done a lot in my other videos. If you want to go through the computer vision series to go through some of the videos, you will see me use image.show. In fact, actually my PyTorch series as well, my deep learning series also uses image, and you will also see image.show and similar techniques like that. So I'm not also going to go into too much of the details. I'll leave you to explore those on your own if you're really interested about that. Right, and I just want to return the image in the end. So if you want to start using this generate image, all you need to do is to just pass in the description of this person. So I want to say that this is a description. So take the description and pass it into the prompt and generate some image out of that. So let's go ahead and try that. So I want to say leader image. And what do I name my function? I name it generate_image. So let's say generate_image, and you have leaders. Now take one of them. So let's say if you want to take the third result, the fourth result, just put a 3. This is completely random, it's up to you. But this whole thing, if you were to just say .ilog3, it's going to take all of that. So in order to take, if you don't want to see the likelihood and the name, you just want to take the name itself, just have to say .name. And that will not, that will disregard the likelihood of whatever, because otherwise this whole thing is passed into the prompt as well. It doesn't make sense to be doing that. And then you can say leader_image.show. Okay, so not only are we using the AI to generate the story, the title, the characters, the playable characters in our game, so all of the civilization leaders, we're also generating the image from here. Now, before I run this, I want to maybe have a certain style so that all of the game assets looks like it's being generated by the same person. So if you think about like games like Pokemon or games like Civilization or Star Traders, all of the game has a very certain distinct style to it, right? So I want to give it a style and then make everything have the same style. So let's go ahead and into this, and we change the style here. So I'm setting all of this in story config because later you can create a web application and allow people to choose a few, say choose a few styles, and then you can populate the story config, and all you ever need to touch is a story config. Everything else is already done there. So all you need to do is to just have a web app that allows you to read and write and manage the story config, kind of like a stage manager kind of thing. Alright. So here I want to just call it maybe character style, right? Character style. What do we want to have here? I want to say in-game character portraits. And I want this to be sci-fi. If you can show something in the background, what kind of background do you want? I want to have something like futuristic, civilization in the background. And what I realized is that the AI portrait, sometimes if you don't give it a very overly opinionated on how you want it to look like, it tend to be a bit too varied. So I also want to say something like give it a serious expression on the face, and I want this to be realistic. Okay. Now I'm not sure how well it's going to do in terms of the realistic, because this is, there are probably more state-of-the-art models and stuff, but let's keep it like this. This is good enough. So what do I name it? I name it character style. So what I want to do is to change this, take this up and make it an F string. So why do I make it an F string? Because then I can insert my name and the description behind. Then I can have my story config. Then I can have my character style in there, right? So this is going to prepend this part of my style. I say generate styles like this, and then from here pass in the rest of the description, and let's just generate one, just a random number here. Now if I run this again, let's see what happens. Now I don't know if you can see it better now, but I need to change sort of the position of my screen recording to show you all of that. So what I do is I typically zoom in, right, and now I zoom out everything. This is my entire desktop, and you will see that this is the civilization. This is the third guy for Richard Branson, 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is actually for Benny Bubbles. So Benny Bubbles, he's the loyalist. Let's take a look at that. This is the third person. So Benny Bubbles, loyalist. Benny Bubbles is the leader of the loyalist civilization. He is a master negotiator and a very charismatic leader. Alright. And notice there's no more /n because we handled that already. It's already being replaced to nothing. And Benny Bubbles looks like that. And this kind of meet what we want here. It's an in-game character portrait. It's a bit sci-fi, this is not really in there in the futuristic civilization in the background. But it has a serious expression. I don't know if it's realistic, but it definitely does the job for me as a game character. This is, you could have, spent a lot of money trying to get all of these game assets up, and then you get broke even before you start to launch a game. But now it takes away all of that and just allows you to just create something really quick. And I think it looks pretty good. Another resource I like to use is Lexica. So lexica.art, that's .art, and you can just sort of write your stuff in here, you can just copy this in-game character portrait sci-fi futuristic civilization background and paste that right in here. And you can either search. Search is not going to cost you anything. You're just going to search for anything that is already generated before. So you can use them. You know, for example, this one looks like a pretty nice one. The protagonist. This one looks pretty good as well. This one definitely looks like a leader already. These two of them, right? So it gives you all of the stuff that he has generated in the past, and you can use them for your art assets. If you want something that is truly novel and you don't see good results, you can use the generate function. So click on generate. It's going to ask you to put in your basically a prompt. And then you can also say negative prompt. So you say, I don't want to have any kind of like, let's say I don't want to have any desert in my resulting art. So I could say negative prompt. So which means, you know, whatever you generate in the resulting art, I don't want to have that, right? So you can say, for example, this is a steampunk teddy bear vending machine, and you click generate. It's going to do that for you. So I generated a few words while creating this game, you know, and here I'm walking you through the process, but I've already done this before. So I have a few things like, you know, like in-game notification, you know, how the layout look like and stuff, just put together, so that if I want to pitch this game to an investor, I could show him how the game messaging system looks like, notification system looks like. I can show you some of the screenshots. We're gonna go into all of them later, so right now we don't have to worry about that. Let's just go back to this one. And you know, if you don't want this to be a sci-fi, you know, let's say you want to say the BC bustling space station, you can either use generate again, or I'm just gonna search and gonna find something that already exists. And if they already exist, I could use this, right? This is pretty good. I can use this as one of the game location. I said, okay, this is the new spaceport. You're appointed to this location. You're now the new governor or you're new commander of this civilization. And what would you wish to do? And look at this. This is pretty damn beautiful. Look at that. Right. So it's very, very beautiful. Look at it's very believable. Very suitable for our game style. Right. This is where you have your discussions, your meetings. You can have that a bit futuristic. This is beautiful. This is absolutely amazing. You know, look at this. A lot of details. This is a spacefaring civilization, but now they landed somewhere and they call somewhere. You know, this is a new home after Earth, life after Earth. Rendered portrait of that. So some of this stuff is really beautiful, and you can see what kind of prompt is being used, and you can use them for your game assets, right? So you can. I mean, this is also pretty nice. This is a bit bleak, a bit like a bit dystopian, but and this is a lot of neon lights. So if you like neon lights, you could have that high exposure. More dystopian. This is like the XCOM 2 franchise, if you ever played that. So yeah, so that's that. Now let's go back, and this is a beautiful command center. So if you want to have some game assets for a command center, this is it. So let's go back to this one. Okay, let's see what do we have now. So we have the titles. We have a few titles here: Planet Explorers, Distant Kingdoms, Stellar Frontiers, Space Adventures, Stars of the Pilgrim, and then there is a few leaders. You know, this is probably a bad idea to have something like name after this. So I'm gonna, if you really want to build this for real, don't use like Tony Stark or like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Give it something else. The fact that you're actually putting things like Elon Musk and Tony Stark and Jeff Bezos lead it to believe that you're trying to put a game that is having a humor that sort of like reference the Silicon Valley startups. So now you give you Mark Zuckerberg and you give you Facebook and all of this Richard Branson, Virgin. This is really not what you're going for anyway. I'm just too lazy to come up with real names, so this is what you have here. But you can change that. Now, seeing that this is a game of civilization, you would have kingdoms or alliance or factions or locations, right? You would have all these civilizations. So let's get back up here, and we are gonna have our Civ location, prompt, space theme video game. Okay, and do not waste too much of your time. I'm just gonna copy from some of my game design notebook. Imagine I have a game design notebook and I just copy all of that content from here. So I will just copy it from my notebook so that I can save you some time. So I have Amazonia, which is from here. Amazonia is a civilization of spacefaring humans. They are a ruthless and expansionist civilization, known for their advanced technology and military prowess. I think every single space team game has one of those Amazonia. And Emeraldo is a thriving civilization of star travelers. They are loyal and peaceful. So I'm gonna just have 3 of them, but of course I want it to complete for me. So I'm gonna have civilization and then ask it to complete the rest for me. Then once you have the civilization, you can also ask it to generate some in-game civilization cities or spaceports and stuff. So kind of like what you do with character stuff. So let's just copy that and bring it down here. And let's just have, this is Civ style. So you can say realistic, in-game, space, civilization, cities, and spaceports. And give it some prompt there. say you want some thriving, busy, sci-fi, let's say high resolution, right? High resolution scenery for a city simulation game. So something like this. And let's save all of that, and let's use this save location prompt and a save style at the bottom. So I have the leaders, I have the leader images. So I'm going to have my civilization. So civ equals to, and here instead of generate image, I'm going to first generate the civilizations, and then I'm going to use the generate image to generate art for those civilizations. So a bit similar to what we're doing with the leaders. So first generate, and I'm going to say go into my story config, and here there are the different keys in here, right? Character style, save leaders prompt, save location prompt, save style. So what I want is the save location prompt. So use that save location prompt, generate a few cities, and then again do the same thing, print the civilizations. We could hide this one out now, just to focus on the text aspect of things, and then we can go back to the art. Clear all of that. Let's run it now. And now I just want to focus on the civilizations now, because I'm done with all of that. I have my title, I have my leaders, I have my arts assets for my leaders. So space settlers, space empires, starship commanders, galactic empire. Galactic empire sounds really good actually. If I look at my civs and I look at the first result of that, let's so say .ilog, take the first result of that. This is how it gave me. This is what it gave me, right? The empire. The empire is a brutal civilization of spacefaring humans. They are ruthless, expansionist, civil. So this is basically just copying what I have there. It's not interesting. Let's take a look at this one is something a bit different. This is a ruthless civilization of technologically advanced aliens, and they are a warlike species. So suppose I want to use this and I want to generate arts for that. I could just use the generate image, right? And then I could just pass in the whole of this. Actually, I probably wouldn't want to pass in the name. I just want to pass in the description. So I want to separate the name and the description out from them. So let's go in there and find a way to separate this. So let's say we have this, and we take the name. Okay, this is the entire thing. I could take this and I can say split it by the pipe character, and now it's going to break down into an array of 2. The first one is anything before the pipe, and then the rest is the everything after the pipe. So that's a name and that's a description. That's kind of what I want. So that's perfect. So you could have civ name, civ description, and that's basically civ.ilog, in this case 3.name, split it by this, and now you have the name and the description. So you could say something like for civ and civs, go ahead and do this, right, and bring this in. Maybe make this capital, uppercase. Maybe I don't need all of 5 of them. I just say take up the 3, and then I can say civ image, generate image, and I pass in my story prompt. So I have my story config, and that's my civ style. So when I have that style, then I want to have my civ description. So kind of this is just gonna pass in my description, this part. So I said use that style, use this description, generate some art for me, and then you can finally just say civ image show, and that will do it. And because this is so useful, I'm gonna actually, this is civ.name. Let's test whether this will work. So I have the civ description, and then now you have civ description, and now you can pass this in into your prompt. So here we're saying generate image, civ description. So copy that, paste it in, and this is beautiful. This is kind of what you have here, Empires of Ash, and it does have the Empires of Ash looks, doesn't it? Right? It's a ruthless civilization of technologically advanced aliens, and they are warlike, they're expansionists, and known for their advanced technology and military prowess. Maybe not the technology side of things, doesn't really look like that good there in terms of technology. So along with the leader, we want to save this leader. And again, as always, if you want to find out a few more prompts, a few good prompts, you can always look at what's really good here and just try to copy that. A city built within walls due to quarantine, a semi-modern city with overhead transportations and robots within visible walls, and then try to experiment with that right away in your prompt. So what do we have now? Let's take a look. Let's try and keep stock. We have the title. We generated a few titles. We can pick one of them that we like. Then it also asks the AI to generate some leaders for us. Then generate some image portraits for those leaders, generate some civilizations, generate some portraits for those civilizations. Actually going to hide this out because I don't want to keep using my credits to generate arts. And so the last thing I want to show you in this world building exercise is the dialogues and the cutscene prompts. So I want to generate some dialogues, I want to generate some cutscenes, put them in there, and so in the game itself, sometimes you get to a certain chapter and you have some cutscenes, some dialogue, some conflict, makes the game a little more interesting, right? So here I want to generate some cutscenes, but I don't want to write all of the cutscenes. So I could also use AI to generate that for me. So I already have the name, the city, the titles and stuff. I could go ahead and maybe add some cutscenes as well. So the first thing I'm gonna do is to go back up here, right? This is getting a little bit long, so this is the time you think about whether you should move this into a JSON or into some sort of database. But I'm just gonna keep it simple. Say in-game cutscenes, and then I'm gonna give it some initial dialogue, and I ask it to continue writing that for me. I say continue writing the in-game cutscenes following the format of the dialogue provided below. Now I'm not gonna waste your time by writing that out, hand by hand. Instead, I'm just gonna copy it from my game document and I'm just paste it in here. And also just to, if you wonder, did I write all of that on my own? I did not. While writing that up, I use a lot of the AI to do most of the work. I just have to prompt it a bit, and make it a little bit better for presentation. But that's kind of what I did. So I didn't actually write all of this out. And if you want to use it, go ahead and use it. So you have welcome commander, you have been appointed as the new leader of the Civ civilization. So I will require a Civ civilization to be plugged in here. So right now I'm using it as a string, and here this is just a template that I need to be filled. And then my game will give you the Civ description. So let's say you pick the Amazonian, it will give you the description of Amazonian. If you pick Emeraldo, it's going to give you the description of Emeraldo. If you pick Devaltos, it's going to give you Devaltos, so on and so forth. Your mission is to lead your people to prosperity and glory among the stars. And then a few stories here. So their nearby starport, the Mercury Expanse, has alerted us to some hostile activity in their vicinity. Dr. Maya is kind of the second person. She's also in the room. She's also very senior rank. And she said, I urge caution, Commander, in the past encounters with, and then we have an ally, they have proven to be distrustful. So depending on which one you pick, the one that you did not pick, one of them will become your enemy, one of them become an ally. Then they are now fighting over whether or not they should send their troops for assistance, because the main guys, the main team is out for an expedition, so they only have the junior guys. But if you send the junior guys, then you're gonna put yourself at more risk, because now you have no more reserve. So I could put in some in-game prompts here, and then I could customize it to ask it to complete that for me. So remember all of the template literal. So I need the civilization, Civ, I need Civ description, Civ2 description, ally 1, Civ2. I need all of this to be filled in. So I'm gonna uncomment that out, and I'll take the Civ3. In fact, if I want to split it cleanly, I would also want to take out the whole description. So I may also add here and just say take out the whole description as well. So in this case, I will just remove everything, and then it will just start with the description. So you say Empires of Ash is a ruthless civilization. Okay, this is just plain old Python. I will duplicate that. Now I'm going to call it 2. This I'm going to go into 4. Do the same thing. Let's go back here. There is ally 1. It says that, right, I urge caution, Commander. Then there's a description of Civ2. In the past encounters with ally 1, they have proven to be distrustful and quick to escalate conflicts. I recommend that we send a small fleet to investigate the situation. So remember, they're arguing about whether or not they should send an investigation team or send a full reserve team. So I also need an ally. So I would say ally 1, and this is very similar to what we have up here, which is just taking the leaders from here and then just take the first result or the second result. I don't know. So just let's say take the third result as well if you want. Okay. So third result will be 2, and then take the name. Based on this, if you want to, you could just try and run it again to make sure that you're getting the right thing. Okay, so there's General Tor, right? Then there's a Civilization United Systems. And then remove any white space, blank space after that. So I'm going to just take all of this together and just say take the first result and remove any blank space. And now we're ready to format everything. So cutscenes prompt, in-game cutscenes, but we use the format function to replace the Civ name, Civ description. This Civ description is from this one. So there's an underscore here, so I want to pass underscore here. Right? So what this is going to do is fill up all the templates using what you provide here. Civ2 underscore description, so let's copy that and let's do the same. Okay, so we have the cutscenes prompt. We haven't really done anything with it. We do need to pass it into the generate. So this is, you see how here we have titles equals to generate, and that's kind of what we want to do here, right? So we could say take the dialogue, or actually just call it cutscenes, and we say generate. And what do you want to generate? You want to pass in this as the prompt. So cutscenes generate prompt, and that's kind of it. Actually, you could just go ahead and just run it. But because this is asking it to generate a lot of cutscenes, I want it to maybe have more tokens for it. So I want to have like higher tokens so that it could generate more text from me. I also want it to be a bit more bold, a bit more random, so I'm going to give it a higher temperature, up it a little bit more. In fact, I'm also going to use a different model. I'm going to say the model equals to command nightly. So this is a more recent model, a newer model than the base model. The base model and the base-like model is actually a little bit older. This is slightly newer, so command nightly. And finally, you could have like number of generations. I think this could just go down to 3. I don't need 5 anymore. And so I have the cutscenes. And finally, you could say dialogue. And dialogue would just be whatever the prompt is, and then add a new line, and then just add the results of this generate. The results of that is going to come into cutscenes, so we just get add cutscenes. So this is going to add all of the prompt, which includes all of the story, which is right up there, and then it's going to add the cutscenes in there, and then finally, if you want, you could just print the dialogue. We could quit this up, and let's run this. So again, it generates everything again from start. Exodus, Space Colony, Stellar Conquest. Stellar Conquest sounds really good. Space Lords, Kurt Cobain, Steve Wozniak, Lady of the Lake, Peter Van Houten, Kate Sackhoff, Space Force, Saturnia, Avalon, Transmet, Nirvana. Alright, they're not too bad. They're not too bad. I mean, this you can still. We spend so little time on this. If you really want to do this for real, you can just go ahead and make it better. So the situation at military expense is dire, but we cannot afford to send our entire reserve fleet. We need to preserve our fleet in case of future attacks. Instead, we will send the Delta Reserve to assist the Free Worlds Union. Okay, I don't know where the Free Worlds Union come from. We did not have that in there, so we could improve that. But the rest is pretty good. We did not talk about this stuff. We did not talk about future attacks. So if I search for it, see, it's not in my prompt at all. So these are novel sentences they're generating. And I could increase the size, right, so that it generates more of that. But here it gave it, try to generate novel sentences to complete my dialogue and to help me generate more in-game dialogues and cut screens and stuff. Now I'm a little bit running out of time. I would want to show you a lot more, but maybe this could be a future series altogether about coding this whole thing up, building a game out together using AI. But for now, I think I would have to cut this video short. I'll leave you to explore the rest on your own. This is a very exciting project. There's a lot of opportunities here. If you're working in any kind of creative field, making games or whatever, right? Getting Cohere and Stability AI, all of these tools into your toolbox is gonna be really, really future-proofing yourself. So I'll leave you to explore all of them. All of the code that you see, along with the rest of the series, all of them are on my GitHub repo. So if you want to, just hop over that to a Git clone and you get all of the same code and you can try to experiment that directly on your computer. You can also go and look at my playlist to watch all of the LLM playlists, learn about embeddings, learn about how OpenAI works, ChatGPT, learning how to create your own model and running on your own document, running on your own local computers and all of this stuff. I teach you a lot of those kind of things throughout the series. And I think we're right now on video number 9, video number 10, I'm not even really sure anymore. But anyway, that's all I have time for today. I hope you learned something new. I'll see you again some other time.